I'm going to imagine that most of you here today have asked this question, are we there yet? And probably when you were a child, you asked it out of great sincerity and great longing, and sometimes almost a sense of desperation. Because when most of us grew up and we were on a trip going someplace, we didn't have an iPad or movies in the car. We didn't have, so sometimes that trip could seem pretty long. I mean, how many times can you do the alphabet game and, and whatever other kinds of games, all of us create to pass the time in a car. And for some people, they can sleep. They just get in the car and they fall asleep. But for a lot of us, that isn't the case. So you have to figure out some way to manage your, to feel like, how are we going to make this? But it implies, the question implies that there's a bit of impatience or a bit of uncertainty or a bit of desire, a strong desire to get where we're going. Are we there yet? And so today we're going to talk about this process. And for those of you who've been with us over the last few weeks, we're in a series that we're calling Some Things Should Never Change. And it's really, I'm building this as a pre-summer series because what I'm building up to really next week, I'm building up to actually putting into motion something for us all for the summer that will help us to identify the things that we've maybe already been doing. Now we're hitting the summer months, summer weeks, and what are the things that we've been doing all year or should have been doing all year that we want to keep doing during the summer? Schedules change, kids are out of school, vacation happens, all these various things go on, but what is it that should stay the same through the summer months? And I'm not going to pick that for you, but you're going to have an opportunity to choose from some things that we offer you and to identify those or to put your own in there. They don't have to go off of our grid. But next week, we'll be giving you a sheet or booklet. It's still not determined the size of it yet. We're working on it, to where you will be able to take it with you going into the summer. One of the things I am asking us all to do is to memorize John 15. And is there anybody here prepared to stand up and quote it this morning? Okay. Are we there yet? No, it's going to take a while, okay? We're going to get there. But we'll be asking through the summer months, through the summer weeks sometimes, for people who have gotten it, who are there. You go ahead and you're there. And but if you do raise your hand, be prepared to say it on a microphone publicly, okay? We do. We have full expectations of that. And you're not going to get off by just going, well, I'm just shy. You weren't shy enough you were shy. You raised your hand. If you raise your hand, we're going to say you got it. And so if we have 10 people raise their hands, obviously we'll just pick the one that we think is lying and ask them to do it. So that's where we're headed with this, and we believe it's going to be a good thing. And so there are just some things that we really should not change. There are some things we shouldn't change. Not because we get in ruts or not because we're just traditionalists, but there's some things that are worth being a part of our lives and will serve us well our entire lives. One of the scriptures that has to do with our series, we put in as our series verse really is Hebrews chapter 13. Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so what we're trying to do is hook into the things that we would say, what are some of the same things, samenesses of Jesus that we want to make same in our lives? We want to connect to and say, we want to have that sameness. We are to exemplify Christ in our lives. He is a model for us. He is not only our Savior, but he set the example for us. What are some of the samenesses that he demonstrated, that he taught, that he talked about, that we need to be connected to that make those steady purposes in our lives? Last week we talked about how the routines that we have actually end up giving us the results that we get. Whatever routines, if we were to sit here and go around and take interviews today, and you were to tell me what your daily routines are, what your weekly routines are, what your monthly routines are, I wouldn't have to be a palm reader or anything else. I could tell you several things about your life. And not that they can tell you anything either, by the way. That was not a recommendation by any stretch of imagination, but for that. But And so what I want to say is the routines that we create in our lives, the patterns that we develop, have so much to do with who we are today and who we will be next year and the year after. So we're really talking about getting some same routines in our lives that will serve us well today and will serve us well for life. Not to say that there aren't some same routines that are good for a season, but we're talking about those who actually last a lifetime. So today, as we talk about this question, are we there yet? I would say the answer that I'm going to give to you is not an answer that most of us like. And so, sometimes there are sermons that are feel-good sermons, and those are fun to preach, and you're glad because everybody will feel good when you leave. We're talking about the love of God and just, and some other topic that just is so encouraging, and it just means so much to us. But today, we're going to, in answer to this question, are we there yet? I'm going to propose that this might take a while. This might take a while. Now, for most of us, we don't like to hear that. Whenever you take your computer in to be fixed and they go, well, this might take a while, that's not good news. You take your car to the shop and this might take a while. Not only is it bad news because of time, it's probably bad news because of expense on that one. What about the mom who's going into labor? And they say, this might take a while. I think Shelley gave us a pretty good perspective on kind of the crashing of the ideal there on that. And something that I'm familiar with is planning a church, having started a church. There's a mindset, something that if someone were to come to me and say, hey, Rod, I'm thinking about starting or planning a church, and one of the things that I would have to tell them is this might take a while. We're approaching 19 years as a church, and we don't consider ourselves a church plant anymore. We consider ourselves an established church, and God's enabled us to be able to help other churches who have planned, but it's going to take a while. When an addict is endeavoring to change a pattern of behavior, it's not what we want to hear, but the truth is, this might take a while. Whenever we're hoping for a relationship to recover, the last thing we want to hear is, this might take a while. But I have to speak the truth. And so I'd like to have you do something with me. You have to work with me. You have to figure this out with the people around you. I'd like for one of you to turn to someone close to you and ask the question, are we there yet? And I'd like for the person to ask that question to say to them, this might take a while. Could you do that? I wasn't talking about the sermon, even though that's true often, It's like you're going, yeah, here we go again. This is going to take a while. No, I'm really talking about the stuff in your life, the place you are right now, the moment in your existence right now where you're going, are we there yet? Can this be over? Can we be done with this? I'm here to tell you it might take a while. Are you glad you came? Anyway, hang with me, okay? Let's go to John chapter 15 and verse 1. I had someone mention to me, I won't call any names or anything like that, after service, after I mentioned that we're going to memorize John 15, they mentioned to me, they said, have you memorized it yet? I said, no, we're doing this over the whole summer. He said, I noticed you read it this past week. I'm going to read it again today, okay? But coming up here, I'll be quoting it to you, all right? I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it'll be even more fruitful. And we're going to stop right there for the moment and probably even kind of hang there for today, along with a couple of other supporting scriptures. Do you know that pruning is I actually realize this. If you're not a gardener type, you might not even know you might think we're talking about eating prunes or something like that. That's something, well, anyway, we won't go into that. But prunes are good for you, but we're not talking about prunes. we're talking about being pruned, and that means being cut back. And so whenever we're pruned, it doesn't mean that we've been cut, obviously, but it's not the same as being cut because of unfruitfulness. It's being cut so that we can be more fruitful. And so the same thing happens in this situation to the fruitful and the unfruitful. If you look at it, he says, he cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit. While every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes it. Now, there's something about this, just on the surface of it, you're going, this doesn't seem fair. Unfruitfulness, cut off. Fruitfulness, cut off. And so it seems like maybe you go, well, maybe someone who doesn't go to church seems to be that their life is just as good or better than yours. Someone who doesn't read the Bible ever, doesn't even really care about the Bible, that they seem to be doing just fine. Someone who never is generous to anyone in their lives, but yet they seem to have some toys. You can, go down the list of that and go, it just seems like maybe we're the same. But I mean, but they don't show any indication of any faithfulness or fruitfulness for God. And I'm trying. I'm doing my best. I'm doing what I believe God wants me to do. And let me just say this, and that is that God is in the snipping business. And he snips for two reasons. He snips for those who are unfruitful, and he snips those who aren't fruitful. So you might want to say it like this. You're snipped if you do, and you're snipped if you don't. But what I would like to encourage you to do is just turn to somebody near you. This is going to be a little more interactive sermon maybe, and say, you're snipped. You're being snipped right now, okay? Just turn to them. Just say it. Just go ahead and say it. There's some things you have to say out loud. You're being snipped. Now, the question really you want to know is, why are you being snipped? Are you being snipped because you're unfruitful? Are you being snipped so that you can be more fruitful? And everyone in this place is being snipped, but not all for the same reasons. Everybody you see is being snipped, but not all for the same reasons. See, fruitfulness and faithfulness are inseparable. They go together. It's not really something that you can take apart. And there's something in all of us that wants to be fruitful. There's something in every person. It's a God-given desire. If you even go back and the scriptures on your sheet here in front of you to Genesis 1:22, it says, God blessed them and said, be fruitful and increase in number and fill the water in the seas and let the birds increase in the earth. Be fruitful. Be fruitful. There's something given to us at the very beginning of creation that it's a desire for us to be fruitful people. And it's a God-given desire for each of us. And so fruitfulness is a state of being. It's not always something that you can see. And if you look with me, this is really a kind of a core verse to what we want to talk about today. And from Psalm chapter 1 and verse 3. It says, that person, talking about the person who is blessed from verse 1, God blessed them, that person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, whose leaf does not wither, whatever they do prospers. And so here's a concept I want you to think about. Bears their fruit in season. Doesn't mean that they're not a fruitful person whenever you're not seeing the fruit being born. They're planted in an opportune situation where they're being nurtured by the streams of living water. They're receiving, the roots are going deep. And sometimes it seems like there's inactivity going on, but there are seasons of fruitfulness. And I think sometimes that we have a tendency to think when we can't see something that's an indication that there's no growth occurring, and that is not necessarily true. The crepe myrtles, because as they're a part of our agriculture around here, or our landscaping, crepe myrtles are probably just one of the most visible examples, and we mentioned them last week, that they hold flowers for so long. They just always are flowering. They're always pretty, except for whenever they're pruned. When they're pruned, they look like a stick coming out of the ground with some stubs on them, That's just what they look like. They're kind of ugly at that point. But for most, whenever the season comes in, then they're fruitful for almost a whole season of whenever flowers would bloom. But it takes the cutting back, and if you don't cut them back, and it get more and more and more branches until, in some cases, they'll break. They become kind of more like a bush than they do a wonderful looking decorative plant. See, cutting off implies that you've lost your connection. When you're cut off, it implies you've lost your connection. And Jesus said, remain, remain, remain. If we go down through this passage, remain in me and I in you. Remain, remain. And so the key idea, one of the key sayings that we need to be putting in our lives is remain. We remain in Christ. We remain in him. We stay connected. And whenever something's cut off, it implies losing that connection. And Jesus is not referring to the fact that we're cut off and thrown away in the second piece as we're talking about pruning. He's referring to the idea that we're cut back in order to be more fruitful. And so and sometimes whenever you think in terms of this, it seems like, wow, when you're cut off, it just seems like that's a negative connotation. But it almost has this sense of like, God's just in the snipping business to get people separated from him because of various reasons, either because of their lack of fruitfulness or the other. And so sometimes, we hear people say, and I've said it myself, God can't love you any more today than he has already loved you. He's always loved you. His position towards you is love. So why is he in the snipping business if his position toward us is love? Here's what I want to tell you, that anybody who is connected to the vine, that his love is always flowing, and he's even willing to graft you in, but his love is always flowing. His love never stops flowing toward us. And so what happens is that we can cut ourselves off from the flow. We can disconnect ourselves from the flow, but it doesn't disturb God's love toward us. And just in the story of the prodigal son, the father's love never changed toward his son. The son ran far and hard and didn't feel that love because of his own unfaithfulness. But in the end, when he came rushing to the father, and the father rushed toward him, he experienced that love that the father had for him all along. And so sometimes, we're talking about the feeling of love versus in the experience of love versus the truth of God's love always flowing toward us. And so even whenever he prunes us back, he's flowing into our lives so that we will be more and more and more fruitful. See, there's no worse feeling really for most of us than having no fruit. Shelley did an excellent job on Mother's Day, didn't she? And one of the things that she talked about was the barren womb. And in talking about that, she revealed some of the things that people say and some of the things that people do. And it's a hard thing to go through that barrenness. And then it's even harder whenever you have friends that get pregnant and complain about being pregnant. It's like it's that it almost increases it. Someone who's lived their whole lives to be a husband or to be a wife, but it seems like it just keeps not working out for them, and now they're approaching toward 30 years old or whatever, and all that makeup and all that working out at the gym and everything else doesn't seem to be bearing any fruit. It doesn't seem to be. I know there's a lot more heavy stuff involved in that, but anyway. And maybe sometimes you invest your life in studying and earning some degrees, and it seems like you can't get a job that aligns itself with what you're qualified to do, and so it seems like you're often working below what your potential really is. I mean, on and on and on. We can think of the situations where we feel like we're not bearing the fruit that we thought we would bear or we wanted to bear. And I would also say this. Now, you're not allowed to be disappointed with the fruit that you're receiving or not bearing if you haven't planted any seeds. If you haven't done anything to be in a place for that, then you can't complain. I mean, if You can't complain about the A you didn't get if you never even opened the book, you know? And so, we have to make sure we're not just making excuses for ourselves or expecting some kind of fruitfulness that there was no application in our lives, no connectedness to the right things that would bring it. See, some seasons of fruitfulness, no, I actually mean to say fruitlessness. Some seasons of a lack of fruitfulness, let's put it that way, are preparation for greater fruitfulness. That's not what we want to hear. But the truth is, going back to the tree planted by the rivers of water, it brought forth fruit in its season. There's some seasons that don't look very fruitful in our lives, and that might be a very season that God is preparing us for greater fruitfulness. See, the difference between being cut off and being cut back is if you're cut off, you're severed. If you're cut back, you know God has more in store for you. If it's cut back, can I say it this way? It's coming back. If it's cut back, it's coming back. And I want you to, in your own mind, picture some things that you feel like you've been pruned down to the nubs. You look like the crepe myrtle bush that just has some stubs sticking up. You just feel like I'm standing out here, and those trees almost, to me, they look like they're naked, They're standing out in front of everybody just naked. And you feel like that. You feel like I'm fruitless. If you've been cut back, it's coming back. It's coming back. See, life may take the cut, but God is holding the scissors. In other words, a person might cut you back. But understand, God doesn't cause everything to happen that happens in our lives, but he does allow it. If something happens, he has allowed it. Doesn't mean it doesn't mean, he's not the creator of evil. So when evil things happen to you, it's not because God's determined he wants to do something evil to you, but he has allowed it to happen. And so, and whenever disease occurs, whenever people hurt us, do things to us, whatever, when our circumstances are not what we would choose. Remember, life may make the cut, but God is holding the scissors. That just means he has a bigger control factor involved than what we see in the moment. And no matter how life cuts you, remember this: your Father is the gardener. And if you remember the implications of who our Father is, and we're not going to do a study on that right now, but it's a tremendous thing, and come back on Father's Day and you'll hear some really good stuff on that. I think all of us know the frustration of unfruitfulness. But I need to tell you something. I want you to do a little exercise here with me, okay? I want you to think about this, and that is, think about if you spend, this is something I've told couples that have done marriage counseling with, that maybe came in a pretty, sometimes it ends up being a pretty high crisis point for some people. The wiser thing, I'll just go ahead and say this, the wiser thing is, before it hits crisis point, back whenever you're just sensing there's some trouble and difficulty, things aren't working, that's a much better time to go for counseling than it is when you're in crisis mode. Still go at crisis mode. But at crisis mode, there's sometimes big walls that are built up, big barriers. Sometimes there's offenses that run very deep and have been held onto a very long time. And something that I use as an example is this. I remember when I was traveling in college. I was in college and traveled with a group, and I was on a team of people who were involved in doing ministry, and so sometimes some would be doing the music, and then others would be doing the preaching. We'd go to churches on the weekend and do stuff like that, and just help out with the churches and do everything from preaching to Sunday school classes to singing and all that stuff. So I was with one of those groups, and I was driving, and we were headed to a part of Florida that I wasn't familiar with, and we were on a turnpike. And so we missed our turn. It so happened that the next exit was 22 miles up the road. And the church service was going to start at a certain time and all that. And so, I would see those little crossovers and things, but I also saw the warnings and everything else. The reality is, I ended up going 22 miles further than I needed to go. And guess how many miles it took me to get back where I had been? 22 miles. Isn't it funny that we can spend 10 years, 15 years, 20 years going down a wrong road, and then somehow think that in 2 minutes or 2 days or 2 weeks, that's all taken care of. That all's fixed. But isn't God a God of miracles? Absolutely, he's a God of miracles. But I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of stuff that got us to that point. And you can't instantaneously get back from that point to where you need to be. I'm not going to say spiritually and emotionally and every other way it's going to take 22 miles or 22 years to get back, but I will tell you this. Are we there yet? What should you answer? This might take a while. Can I just get everybody to say that together? Let's just practice once. This might take a while. I'm going to ask you the question. Please give me the answer. Are we there yet? Turn to the person next to you and say, I got to say it again, this might take a while. I know it's not what you want to hear, folks, but I got to tell you the truth, okay? You've wronged someone for years and you want them to forgive you now. Or they won't forgive me. Okay. Why don't you just give them a little bit of time? Why don't you say to yourself, this might take a little while? You can't undo 22 years in 2 days. This may take a while. Your kids saw you live without God for 14 years, and now they think you're a hypocrite because you go to church, and they don't want to go with you. This might take a while. Verse 2 again says, he cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit. Well, every branch that does bear fruit, he purges so that it will even be more fruitful. Every branch. While is one of those words that you don't think about, but we use all the time. While every branch that does bear fruit. If you ever think about this, you think about how we dislike the word while. Like I said earlier, you take your car in, you take your computer in, someone says, this might take a while. We don't like the word. But it gets used in all kinds of contexts. I'm going to give you a couple of contexts from scriptures. In Hebrews chapter 10, verse 37, it says, for in just a little while, he who is coming will come and will not delay. Don't you like it when God... sometimes I can't stand it when God's so specific, it just like cuts me. I'm like going, man, you just had to say it just like that, didn't you? You had to say it so plain to me, I can't argue with it. You can't even go to the Greek and study it away. You can't go to the Hebrew and explain it away. It's just there, and that's it, and you got to take it at face value. That's what God said. And it's like, oh man, it just got me, it convicted me. And I can't argue with it. It's there. But you know what? God also chooses to be as vague sometimes as he is specific. He's going to come in a while, in just a little while, even a little while. But whenever a day is like 1,000 years for God, what's a little while to him mean? I want to have these discussions not with God, not in a sense of questioning him or his character or anything about him, and just going, man, that's like a setup. And just a little while, whenever you see a day is 1,000 years, and and I'm like, what does a little while mean? See, oftentimes we are driven by a sense that destiny has deadlines, because we live in a world of time. And it's one of the greats that said, the opportunity of a lifetime must be seized in one's lifetime. In other words, you don't do it in your lifetime, you won't get to do it. This is your chance. This is it. I mean, you have only so much time, and we typically are aware of that. Sometimes we say, time's just flying by. I'm guilty of saying that. As I've gotten older, I used to hear people say, the older you get, the faster time goes, and I go, hey, time's time. I mean, how's it any worse how's it faster when you're older? Truth is, it appears to me they knew what they were talking about. Because it seems like to me that a year is squeezed into about 6 months now. Years go by in a 6-month pattern. And I'm going, this is crazy. Because we're at the season where we want to stretch it out a little bit. And I just want to encourage you, don't ever wish time away, because time's all we have. So we're driven by this sense that destiny has deadlines. And let me just say this. It is true that we have to seize the opportunities that are within certain time frames. While your kids are small, you have a little while to influence them while they think you're great. Because there'll come a time when they think you're dumb as rocks. And that you can be an advisor and everything else, but that's about all you are until they have their second child. And then you're wise, and you hope you live long enough to see it. But the fact is, you only have an opportunity while they're small. That's an opportunity. One of the things that I was struck with even this past weekend was there was a gentleman that made contact with me that was a part of our church whenever our first year and a half. So it's like 17 years ago or something like that, since he'd gone through divorce and was, I just kind of lost track of him. Called me up and wanted to know if he could come to church. And he did. And it struck me in the sameness issue, because what I told him was, I said, we're still here. We're still doing the same things. Some of us have a little more gray hair. Some of us have put on some weight. And some of us, we may not all look the same, but we're here doing the same thing. And I just thought, because this is a person who hasn't had a lot of church experience otherwise, and I just thought, what if we weren't doing the same thing? What if we weren't about doing the right thing? And I just want to tell you, there's some things, I've been preaching now for 30 years, and I don't know. I doubt I'll preach till my last breath unless God takes me out early. But the reality is that I have a season. And there's been plenty of times along the way that doing anything other than preaching looked good to me. I mean, picking up garbage some days looked good to me. Not that I've not liked preaching and enjoyed pastoring, that kind of thing. I have, but I'm just saying, there's been some times I've thought doing something else would probably, be more fun, or at least be calmer, or be something. But there's a season of time that we have to do what God's given us to do. And this is my season to do what it is. And I just want to tell you, as long as God's called me to this place, except for having other people speak occasionally along the way, you'll come in here and I'll still be trying to explain things from the Bible to you, from Revelation all the way through the maps, and trying to do something that will encourage you to walk with God and to follow Him. Because see, we only have this time, this opportunity, and what we do with it really does matter. I'm afraid that sometimes we're missing stuff while we're busy chasing stuff that isn't worth your while. You're missing stuff while you're busy chasing stuff that isn't worth your while. Life is a vapor. It's like grass that grows up and withers. Those aren't things I'm making up. Those are things in the Bible. Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 3 tells us probably one of the best examples of making the best use of our time. Nehemiah 6 says this, "So I sent messengers to them with this reply. I am carrying on a great project and cannot go down. Why should I leave the work? Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you?" Now, they were inviting him to a meeting in the plain of Ono. in Nehemiah, he said, oh no. Sometimes does that make you think about why things were named the way they were, whatever, but anyway, just coincidence but he said, oh no, I'm not. Why should I stop this great work while, and when I go down and meet with you, the wall stops being built? Why should that happen? He said, and most of you, we did a series not too long ago in the book of Nehemiah, at least the first 6 chapters. And this is one of my favorite passages in Nehemiah, even though there's a lot of really, really solid, awesome stuff in Nehemiah. Because I think this is a very thing that oftentimes gets us. I believe that Satan is in the business of distracting us from doing what we need to be doing when we need to be doing it. And Nehemiah was given a leave of absence from his job as the king's cupbearer for a while. He had a job to do, and he had to do it quickly because they faced, even though he'd enthusiastically gotten all of the people who lived around the wall to participate, while they were doing that, the enemy was very upset, very angry, and trying their best to take him out. And this is one of their plots. They actually were going to take him down there and kill him because he was being so successful at building the wall. And he said, why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you? He understood his priorities. He understood his opportunities. He understood what he should be doing in that moment at that time. And I just want to say to you, maybe we could take on some of the mindset of Nehemiah. Whenever this comes along and that comes along and the other comes along, that you might say to some of those things. One of my sayings right now that I'm committed to, you might answer to some of those things is, I'm building a great family right now. I'm building a strong marriage. I'm investing in my education. I'm whatever you fill in the blank, whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing right now in this time. See, some of us here possibly have come off of the wall for some things that aren't worth your while. You maybe took your hand away from the task and went down to oh no. And the wall stopped getting built. Your marriage stopped getting restored. Your great family isn't being built. And after a while, you have missed what you were to do while they were growing up, while you were in the season of this marriage. See, while you are focused on building your image or what you think other people want to see in you, that you think will get their attention, you're losing the moments with the people who really love you. It's not worth your while to stand in dead places, regretting dead dreams that will never come to pass. Now, I want you to say another phrase to me with me because here's what I want you to remember, okay? Not only, and let me ask you the first question first. Are we there yet? This might take a while. Thank you, Pat, and a few other scattered voices here. Can I just say that one more time and get us all on board? Are we there yet? Okay. I'm going to get you to say one more phrase with me, okay? It's not worth your while. Could you say that with me? It's not worth your while. It's not worth it. As much as some things are worthy of our investment, of our time, of our energy, of our money, there are things that are not worth your while. What about holding on to an offense that's been made to you? Could we just say together, if someone has done a great offense to you, it's not worth your while to hold on to that? What about resenting the opportunities that you missed? Well, I could have, I would have, I should have, all the things that you miss, all the opportunities you miss. Don't waste another day on it because it's not worth your while. What about complaining about how you were raised? Well, if I hadn't been raised like this, I hadn't had this, I hadn't done, I hadn't. You know how many people I've met who grew up in abject poverty? Do you know how many people I've met whose parents were awful and somehow they seem like a rose in the desert? And I'm just going to tell you, I'm not saying ignore. If there's something you need to deal with, you need to go see a counselor, you need to talk to somebody, you need to process through, please do that. But there comes a point where you got to stop complaining and blaming other people for where you are today and complaining about your parents, and again, an awareness, an understanding. You know, I'm not the kind of person to go sweep something under the rug. I'm not that kind of person. But at the same time, there comes a point whenever complaining about it is not worth your while. Every minute you spend in Ono, you're missing the opportunity. Put another brick on the wall. Now, we're talking about in this series about keeping some things the same. And we're gonna pull it all together this next week. I beg you to be here. Not because I'm going to say something so wise, but I think we're going to talk about how to approach the summer in such a way that this may be the greatest summer you've ever had in your life, the most effective summer you've ever had in your life. And I'm praying for that and believing for that, because our Father is the gardener, and He's going to do some good work in our lives. See, pruning is a part of the process. In this idea of keeping some things the same, pruning is part of the process. We've been talking about that. And so the question to ask at this point now is this worthwhile? Is this worthwhile? Whatever it is that comes your way, is this worthwhile? And I want to tell you that Satan counters our fruitfulness by distraction. And he does it by overcommitment. He just keeps you so busy you don't even know who you are. You just, numbly went through another week. You numbly went through another day. I mean, you're living life, but it's just happening. You're just going through the motions. Is this worthwhile? Overtime and everything else is great, and there are seasons when it's absolutely worthwhile, but there are also seasons when it is not worth your while. Something of greater importance, of greater value is. And I just want to say, if we can have the mindset, have the heart that says, whatever it is that I commit myself to, I'm going to commit myself completely to that. Some commitments that I've made in my life, like I said, my life is really, as I look back on it, has been defined by some of the same things that I've done. The things that I've repeated over and over again have been more defining in my life than the things I've dabbled with. And we know that to be true, but sometimes we don't realize it, so we end up committing ourselves to things that are not worth our while. And we ignore things that we should be committed to that are absolutely worth our while. And so, what are you committed to? Have you made the decision to be committed to it? And this is worth my while. We talked about setting a new routine last week. And it's possible that somebody got kind of motivated and went out and said, hey, I'm gonna fix this routine. And after about 2 or 3 days, just throw it away and go, I can't do that. That's too hard. I'm not gonna do that. This might take a while. This might take a while. You have to make a decision. This is worth my while. And it might take a while before you see the fruit. See, time is either your friend or your foe. Because really, time is neutral. The routine that you do in the time you have has so much to do with the fruit that you experience. And never forget, fruitfulness is a season. But preparation for fruitfulness is ongoing. Being connected, remaining in the vine. You might feel like a stub today. You might feel like the circumstances of life have just been whacking you up, pruning you down. And it might take a while, but I believe you'll see greater fruitfulness if you remain, if you stay in Christ. If God is on your side, then time is on your side. Couldn't find a good solution. You can't find the answer. It's just a matter of time. It's a matter of time if you stay connected, if you stay connected to the vine. God wants you to know he will make it worth your time, worth your while. If you can make it through this season as a stub, it will be worth your while. It'll be worth your time. It'll be worth your effort. It'll be worth your money. You say, well, what am I supposed to do when I feel like I'm a nub and I feel like I'm just in there just kind of getting the nutrients put in, but I don't see much fruit going on. I'm still doing the same things. I'm still staying connected. I'm still doing the things that I know will serve me well, serve God well, and I'm still doing those things, but I'm not seeing great fruitfulness right now. Then I would just encourage you, worship while you wait. Worship while you wait. And if you remember in Psalm 1, it says he was planted by the streams of water, always receiving nutrition. But the fruitfulness was in a season. Just make sure you're planted in the right place. Make sure you're connected to the vine. Make sure you're remaining. And even though you feel like a myrtle tree, I can't think of the first name, crepe myrtle tree, thank you, and with all the stubs, the fruitfulness that will be evident will come. It's going to be worth your while. You're planted by the streams of water. You're connected to the living one, Jesus Christ. It's going to be worth your while, even though you've had a setback, even though you feel like you're sidetracked, even though you feel like that the expense for whatever has gone wrong is too much. It's going to be worth your while to stay connected. It's going to be worth your while to stay planted in the right place. You know, nobody wants to hear it's going to take a while. And we don't really, most people, I didn't expect anybody to shout and run the aisles, this morning on hearing it's going to take a while. But the Bible has other words that we do get pretty excited about. And one of those words is suddenly. Suddenly. The children of, or the apostles and those were gathered in the upper room, and suddenly the Spirit appeared, suddenly. We get shouting going on. We start talking about, and suddenly, because you know what suddenly means? It means right now, right here, this moment, man, it happened. We like the suddenly. All of a sudden. All of a sudden. And you can easily look at something that seems all of a sudden and not realize what went behind that all of a sudden moment. There are people who all of a sudden they're in the news and they're famous. They accomplish this great thing. Olympics is probably just one of the most common ones we can refer to. But someone wins that gold medal, and you're just thinking, man, all of a sudden everybody knows their household name. All of a sudden, everybody knows them. They're important. But what you didn't see was when they were a teenager, whenever they were missing some of the parties and some of the other things because they were swimming laps or they were running track or they were doing something else that was causing them. I think if you were to sit down with them and say, man, just all of a sudden here you are, a gold medal winner. They go, no, all of a sudden, folks. It took a while. It took a while. It took a while. We don't want to hear that it takes a while. We like the all of a sudden. But I'm here to tell you, all of a sudden will rarely happen unless a person's been patient to let it take a while. Jesus said, I'm the vine, not the vending machine. We're like, we live in a world where like, put the money in, get the product that's right there, come on, produce on the moment, let's make it happen now. Vines, Jesus is the one who chose to use this as an example. The vine, God being the gardener, and that he's in the snipping business. And that means that we're going to always be going through seasons of great obvious fruitfulness and seasons when it seems like everything's being cut away. But he is the gardener, and we can trust him. See, there's a process. He says, remain, remain, remain. It may take a while. If you give it a while, you'll see all of a sudden something happens. It will be worth your while. And I want to just end with a verse of scripture that I just think kind of caps this off in such an amazing way. It's not on your sheet. It's one I came onto after put that out in John chapter 20, after Jesus had already been buried and or dead, he'd been killed, and he was in the grave. In chapter 20, verse 1, it says this: early Sunday morning, while it was still dark, while Jesus was still in the grave, while the disciples had run, while Peter was thinking about going back to fishing, while they had scattered, while they had, in 3 days, after 3 years, despaired and thought it was all over. In that little while it was still dark. Now, we're talking in this passage about the morning breaking, but she went out early while it was still dark. While the thought was, he's dead, he's there in the grave, we're going to go do something to minister to his dead body. While it was still dark. And I just want to ask you this question. There may still be some dark places in your world, in your life. Maybe some places where it just looks dark. But here's what Mary did while it was still dark. Let's read the rest of it. Mary Magdalene came to the tomb, and she found that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. While it was still dark, she saw the light of the empty tomb. While it's still dark in your life, never forget there's a resurrection day coming. And I'm not talking about even whenever this life is over. I'm talking about a resurrection to the circumstances you're facing, to the situation you're facing. And I know everything doesn't always get better. Everybody doesn't get healed. And death does occur. And certainly then at that point, we have a new resurrection, that ultimate resurrection that occurs in our lives. She came to the tomb while it was still dark. She saw that the tomb had been removed, the stone had been removed. You know, I know it may still be dark, but let me tell you, the sun is rising. The sun is rising. Don't forget to keep doing the same things that you need to be doing and you know you should be doing, even though it may take a while.